Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to Gills in the Blood TV. Something slightly different this week. Obviously, you'd have noticed there was no Monday review looking back on the disappointing defeat at Plymouth at the weekend. And there's going to be no match preview this week ahead of Saturday's game against basement club Burton Albion. I wanted to do a season so far type video. We're pretty much halfway through now in terms of time, not quite in terms of games with only 20 played. So what I've done is I've spoken to two Gills fans, which is Reese Hurd and David Creasy, and they've had a series of questions that they've had to answer. So it's basically a general overview of the season, top three and worst three performances of the season so far. Hopes for the January transfer window, which is now open, and where they think we will finish come the end of the season, and comparing that to what they said at the start of the campaign. So first up is David Creasy, so I will let you listen to his dulcet tones.
Hi Matt, thanks for having me back on the channel. Here's an overview of the Gillingham season so far. If I was to rate it out of 10, I'd probably give us about a 6 out of 10. The league position doesn't really concern me. I think with games in hand, if we can win them, we'd be pushing into the top half, and with a good January, you never know what could happen. The big concern for me is the performances, the way we're just hoofing the ball, missing out the midfield a lot of the time. It's just not very good to watch. I do think if we were actually had fans at the game, whether we would be playing this way or whether it's just the way he wants us to play now. It's just a complete opposite to the football we were watching last year. So hopefully, with a good window, it will change. My top three performances of the season, I'd go for Charlton at home. I thought the way we actually played that game was the way I like to watch us play, passing the ball, and came away with a good point. On another day, we could have won the game. Second game is Blackpool at home. Very good performance, good win, and obviously Dominic Samuel playing on his second debut for the club, getting both goals. The third game I've gone for is Swindon. To me, this was a more typical Gillingham performance of what I'm used to watching. Wasn't the best overall performance, but came away with a good 3 points and a clean sheet. The worst performances of the season so far, Northampton away. The less said about that game, the better. £10 I'm never going to see again. Sunderland at home. Just showed them far too much respect. And again, it was, for me, there was just not much came out of the game. Could have done a lot better, but again, no points. And the third one was probably the worst of all the home games I've seen so far, the Accrington Stanley game at home. Absolutely dreadful. Again, just hoofball, gave them far too much of the play, no possession at all, and the dries down mistake at the end kind of summed up the whole performance for us. What I would like us to see get in January, for me, this may shock some people, it may not shock some people, but for me, I would go out and get a new right back. Ryan Jackson, to me, is not the player that we had first time round. He defensively doesn't seem the same player, and certainly going forward, whether that's because Jordan Graham's there, he doesn't feel that he needs to get forward as much, but for me, he looks scared to cross the ball. Every time he has a chance to cross the ball, he looks to pass the ball backwards so someone else can do it. And for me, if he's only in the team because he can throw the ball quite far, I would look for another option. I would also look for the most things I see Gills fans wanting at the moment, an experienced centre-back. Something that I think we should have done in the summer, but we didn't. And I think it's slowly becoming more and more evident that we need something. And I think it's starting to hamper Conor Ogilvie slightly. I'm always one of those people that I think you should play your best players in their best position. And for me, personally, I think he's a better left back than centre back. And the Northampton game the other day, he started to make mistakes because he was trying to cover too many people, and the penalty and the free kick he gave away was him just being a bit rash. And I think I would move him back to left back, get Tucker back in the team, and find someone, whether it's a loan or someone out there that's a free transfer of age with some league experience, and bring them in. I'd also look for a midfield player, central midfield player, again, someone of age. No disrespect to Eccles and Robertson, I think they're very good players, but I just think we need an option like Stuart O'Keefe, if he had been available, just someone of age that's a bit of experience, bit of know-how, and could guide those young players through. And finally, obviously, if Dominic Samuel is going to be out for the season, we need another centre forward. I can't see Akindi and Oliver getting the goals required to push us towards the playoffs. Is that's where Evans wants us to be. Obviously, they're too similar. They either need to play on their own or they need someone off them. But together, I can't see Akindi and Oliver getting us what we need. At the start of the season, I said I thought Gillingham would finish around about 9th. At a push, I could still see us finishing around there, but if we keep playing how we're playing at the moment, I can only see us finishing slightly lower than that. I would go around about the 10, 11, 12 would be where I think we're going to finish. Until next time, guys, up the Gills.
Thanks for that, David. Some really interesting points in there. Just looking back over what you've mentioned, I think the hoofball thing and the missing out the central midfield has been a big problem throughout the season. I think it was great when we signed Verdane Oliver at the start of the campaign, and we knew that we could go direct to him or John Akindi if we needed to. But the likes of Kyle Dempsey and Jacob Mellis, Stuart O'Keefe, obviously before he broke his leg, and the youngsters like Josh Eccles, who's now gone back to Coventry, Scott Robertson from Celtic, they're all ball-playing types of midfielders. You could probably put in Tommy O'Connor in that, comparing him to where he played in the midfield diamond last season. And too often this season so far, they've been missed out. We've gone back to front far too early. And it's been a bit frustrating, hasn't it? I mean, when it's worked, it's great and no one complains. I mean, Tony Pulis used to play a certain way that weren't easy on the eye, but if you're getting results, no one tends to care. But when you're not winning so many football matches, people look at how you're playing and obviously start trying to pick holes in it, and that's understandable from a fan point of view. In terms of your top three, Charlton, Blackpool and Swindon, all decent wins. Swindon, I think we was probably a little bit lucky first 20 minutes not to concede, but like you say, it was a proper backs to the walls, rugged, dogged Gillingham performance. Worst three, would disagree with one. Obviously, Northampton Town was awful. Fresh in the memory still, just after Christmas. Accrington Stanley wasn't the best. Just gifted them 2 easy goals and generally weren't great on the night. Sunderland, I would disagree with, though. I thought we were decent against Sunderland. I thought we got amongst them, and I think the game hinged on the penalty miss from Jordan Graham and then the red card from Alex McDonald a few minutes later, and after that we were playing, facing a losing battle, weren't we, against 10 men. They've got good players regardless of what their fans think of the manager at the time, whether it's Jack Ross or now Phil Parkinson or Lee Johnson now. They've still got good players. They've got better players than Gillingham. That's no disrespect to us. So disagree slightly on that one, mate, but that's what makes the world go round, isn't it? Transfer window, you've said right back, Ryan Jackson, you're not a big fan of. I know some that are not. That's fine. I've got no problem with him being our right back at the moment. Would it be important enough to get someone in there as opposed to other roles? I'd probably say no. We've got Ryan Jackson. We've obviously got Robbie McKenzie that can play there, and Henry Woods at a push. Experienced centre-back, yes please. I think that's what every Gillingham fan would say if we asked them what position would you sign if we could only get one player in January. I think it would be an experienced centre-back. I've said it all season so far. Totally agree. And you've mentioned a centre midfielder as well, which is interesting, especially when you mention how we play the game. So would it be worth it if we continue to play hoofball and bypass the midfield? Also, maybe it's dependent on Stuart O'Keefe getting back earlier than we'd anticipated. It looks like he's back in training, and I know Steve Evans has mentioned might be back through February, so not too far away. If we can get Stuart O'Keefe back in, that'd be a huge boost with about 3 months of the season left. And in terms of your finishing position, I think you, Reece and myself have all dropped from where we were at the start of the season. So you've said 9th in the summer and you're now saying between 10th and 12th. So a very middle of the road, nondescript mid-table season, which I don't think is a disaster considering what's gone on with the season. No fans, lack of money for a lot of clubs, including us, that we've lost out on due to this coronavirus pandemic that's still ongoing, unfortunately. So, yeah, some really interesting points there. A couple of bits that I disagree with, but a lot of it is similar to along the lines of what I was saying. But let's have a listen now, Gills fans, to Reese Hurd.
Okay, so my thoughts on the season so far. It's been a little bit of a frustrating one, really. A bit like the first half of last season, to be honest. We're just over halfway through, I think, or about halfway through, and we've not really kicked into top gear yet. We've been very much sort of stop-start in terms of the levels of our performances. You know, it feels like we'll play well for a game or two, and then we'll go off the boil and lose 3 or 4 in a row, and then we'll look all right again and think we've turned the corner, and then a couple of weeks later it all disappears again. So it's hard to be too complimentary about the season so far, but also we're not in any danger of going down or anything like that. So in that account, it's not been a disaster by any means, but I just think that going into the campaign, after how strong we were in the second half of our season last season, I think there was a bit more expectation that we were going to be fighting towards that top 6 end of the table from earlier on in the campaign, and at the moment that just hasn't materialised for one reason or another. One of which I think that the amount of turnaround of players probably hasn't helped. Some of that Steve Evans probably didn't ideally want to happen. You know, we know he wanted to keep Aimer, we know he wanted to keep Hanlon, we know he wanted to keep Mandron, and for whatever reason they all decided to move on. So he's had to try and find replacements, and that he's done. Some he's managed to do better than others in terms of the summer recruits. I also think that in terms of this season, I don't think people probably realise just how much we miss Stuart O'Keefe in midfield. You know, we've got quite a few young players in there, and what he brings us is a great amount of experience and calmness to the team, and also a little bit of steel in midfield. So I think without doubt that there's talk of him being back in February, and if he is, then I think that will give us a better chance of kicking up our form as we move through the season. And that is a big problem we've had this season, is injuries. We seem to have had more this season than we have over the last couple of years. You know, people like Samuel being out injured long term is a massive blow. Obviously, Dempsey's only really getting playing now. He's missed large parts of the season, and we've seen the quality he has. You know, Bonham's been injured for a period. It just seems to be one after the other at the moment, which is disappointing and frustrating, because it probably prevents Evans from picking a settled team every week, and one that he believes is his best team to go and pick up results. But in terms of performances this season and the top 3, I'd probably have to say our best performance of the season was probably Rochdale. Not just for the result, but it was the one game that I've seen this season where I felt that we was good for the duration, from minute 1 to minute 90. We was fully in control of that game, and Spotland's a place that we notoriously don't go very well at. But we was absolutely dominant that day, and I remember seeing the team that morning, that day before the game, and I didn't give us a prayer. It was John Kindi up front on his own, no other attackers in the team, and I didn't think we had a chance. And so I'm not a professional football manager, because we went and turned them over, and for me that's the one standout so far. There were 2 performances that I liked. Blackpool at home, I thought was a good performance. Obviously, where Dominic Samuel scored the 2 goals on his second debut for the Gills. And I'd probably say Wigan away as well. I know Wigan aren't what we know Wigan to be at this moment in time, but you know, early on in the season, one of our early away games, we was in control for large parts of that game as well, and probably could have won that one by more. We scored some really nice goals that day as well. I remember Graham and Coyle were really, really good. So they're probably the 3 that stick in my mind most. In terms of ones I'd rather forget, the 3 worst, worryingly enough, I'd probably say the 3 worst performances I've seen this season were all fairly recent. Doncaster away was abysmal. It was absolutely abysmal, and now I fully accept that you don't have to have all the possession of the ball to win a football match. There's more than two ways to skin a cat, and so on and so forth. But you can't win games of football having 20% of the ball. You're giving yourself too much to do. You're making your players work too hard out of possession for too long. And that's how it was when we got the ball. We never really liked doing a lot with it. And we could have been beaten by 5 or 6 that day. Accrington at home, another game that really disappointed me. Don't get me wrong, Accrington aren't, little club and whatnot, but they played very good football against us. But we seemed to offer very little resistance on that afternoon, and particularly being at home in that game as well. That was a really disappointing one. And was it last week, if not the week before, Northampton away, a team that was struggling, a team that had won for a little while, and as we tend to do, we turned up and gave them 3 points, gift wrapped on a gold plate. So yeah, they're the 3 that I've not been overly fussed on. But obviously we are in January now, which gives Stevens a chance to improve the squad. He's already said that in terms of this month's transfer window, obviously we know that Evans is after players. He's said that a couple of times that I think the group needs help and things like that, which it's clear to see that they do in certain areas. And for me, 2 priorities. I think one has to be a striker. Obviously, Daniel Oliver started the season really well, and in more recent weeks, John Kinley's coming to his own a lot more. But for me, they're just too similar for them to be the only 2 strikers we have. I don't necessarily have a problem with them playing together at times, but you need something a bit different. So you've got the option there if you want it. At the moment, we're so limited that we're essentially having to play one up front, because if we do play up front, it's 2 of the same. So if Samuel isn't going to be back for the rest of the season, which Evans said is quite likely, then yeah, we need another forward, for me, without a shadow of a doubt. And the other area I think we really need to look at is centre back, because we conceded too many goals this season. Our success last season was built off being so hard to beat and so hard to score against, and for whatever reason this season it's just not happened. Ogilvie and Tucker were great last season, but yet this time around they're finding consistency a lot harder to come by. And yeah, Magoma and Drysdale, I'm not convinced of the solutions for us. So if I was Evans, I'd definitely be looking at another centre back to come in. Ideally it would be someone with a bit more experience, but at this time of year that's going to be very difficult to find. But yeah, there are 2 areas that I think definitely we need to try and look at as the month goes on, and look to add reinforcements in those areas of the field. But in terms of what I think for the rest of the season, pre-season I was a bit ambitious and predicted 6th. As much as that's not beyond the realms of possibility points-wise, I just don't see the consistency in terms of individual performances or the team performance at the moment to suggest that we're going to go on a 10-15 game unbeaten run like we did last year to get us in contention for that. I just don't see it. But some people I speak to say that they're not that fussed this season, as long as we're not in any danger of going down, which we won't be, because we can't go and watch the games. We'll probably just settle for mid-table and move on. Some would say it'd be horrible if we got to the playoffs and somehow got to the playoff final and we couldn't go and watch, which I can see the argument of that. So yeah, if we finish mid-table, it'd be a little bit frustrating that we haven't really kicked on from last season, but it also wouldn't be the end of the world. And that's where I think we'll end up now. I think we'll be 12th, 13th. And then we'll look to go again next season.
Some really good points again, and I think he sort of follows similar lines to David, and frustrating is a word that Reece used. I can't disagree with that. It's been a case of 1 step forward and 1, maybe 2 back at times this season. As it, like Reece mentioned, we go 4 or 5 unbeaten and win 3 or 4 of that run, and then we had that 5-game goalless and winless run, which was annoying. Expectations were higher than last season, I think, but did COVID perhaps temper that, Reece? With a lack of gate receipts and money, and having to bring in more youngsters, losing people that we wanted to keep that you mentioned. Maybe that's had to change the way that we viewed this season, and maybe a season of consolidation in a similar finishing position to where we did last season wouldn't be a disaster, like you say. You did mention 3 players, Max Amer, Mika Mandron and Brandon Hanlon, that it was clear Steve Evans didn't want to lose. Did we replace them? Max Amer, absolutely not. I know some Bristol Rovers fans have said he's not started great there, but for us he was really good last season. Nurtured Jack Tucker through games in the middle, and we certainly didn't replace him in terms of ability or experience at the moment. Mika Mandron, I'd say we've probably replaced with Verdane Oliver. Looking at their comparative goal stats at the moment, they've got a similar amount this season. Verdane's gone past what Mika got for us last season, more importantly for me. So in that sense, I think we've probably replaced Mika, although I wouldn't have been averse to him staying at the club. And Brandon Hanlon, I think we've replaced his goals from last season with Dominic Samuel. They're not exactly the same player. We know how Brandon used to use his pace and his explosive power to run the channels and get in behind and try and create chances for himself and others. Dominic Samuel's probably a more natural finisher, but unfortunately it looks like Dominic's out for the rest of the season with a torn hamstring, which has been delayed further, unfortunately, because he's not been able to have surgery due to picking up COVID. So we've sort of half replaced Brandon, I think, in terms of goals. He got 7 last season. Dominic was on 6 before his injury. Do we have that explosive pace and power in forward areas? Perhaps not. Top 3 games, you went for Rochdale, Blackpool and Wigan. Can't really argue with any of them. I think I've got 2 in my top 3, which we'll get to at the end of the video. And in terms of worst 3, you went for 3 very recent ones. Doncaster, like you mentioned, awful, completely off the pace, didn't see enough of the ball. I'm a big fan of stats, and I think I've been quite vocal on Facebook though about possession and how it's not that important, and you don't need 60, 70, 80% of the ball to win football matches. But as you say, you certainly need more than 20, because eventually your opposition will have enough of the ball to create a chance and they'll stick one in the net, and then you have to try and change the way you play, get on the ball more yourselves and flip it around and try and create something going forward. And it's very difficult if you're seeing such little of the ball, then having to try and chase it. And even when we got to 1-1 against Doncaster, I don't think we really looked like we were going to go on and win it, and we conceded straight away again, didn't we? And that was pretty much it. And I think 2-1 flattered us. Accrington, already mentioned, on the back of David saying the same thing, and Northampton as well. Very, very poor performance against the side that had lost their previous games, 2 games 4-0, I think, which is a little sort of throwback to generous Gillingham in the days under Steve Lovell and Adrian Perrick a little bit. So very frustrating. In terms of transfer window, striker and centre back, you said, which I think is very imperative with Dominic Samuel being injured. Can only echo what David said again. We need experience. We need some leadership in the middle of the park defensively to try and settle us down, try and bring about more clean sheets. And Reece, like David, has dropped us down a little bit in terms of finishing position. He was 6th at the start of the season. Reece thought we was going to be charging towards the playoffs, which I don't think was completely out of question. But he's changed that now to between 12th and 13th. So again, another mid-table season. Not in any danger, but probably not going to challenge the real top end of the table. Right, on to my picks now. So I won't go into too much detail because there's a lot of stuff that's already been covered by David and Reece. My overview is inconsistent. There's only been 1 or 2 games where we put a performance together for 90 minutes. That was Wigan and Rochdale for me. Thought we were really good in them 2 games. Too many tight games where we were drawing them last season, and that was a thing that was used against us. Said we drew too many, but this season we seem to be losing them. If you think Fleetwood at 0-0, we hit the post and the bar, lost 2-0. Ipswich in the league, conceding the last 5 minutes, lost 1-0. Picked up a point up there last season. Sunderland missed a penalty, then had a player sent off at 0-0, ended up losing the game. Didn't get beaten 4 fixtures against them last season. That's three more points. So we'd be on 29 and a lot closer to the top 6 than we are at the moment. It'd be 3 points instead of 6. And that's something we need to address moving forward into the second half of the campaign. Yeah, back to the point, we've not really put together 90 minutes on a consistent basis. If you look at Woking and Exeter in the Cup, Woking, we were brilliant second half to come back and win, but the first half weren't great. Exeter were really good for half hour and then conceded 3 in 10 minutes. It cost us a place in the competition. Cambridge, 0-0 away from home in the EFL Trophy. I said at half time watching that one, I thought the fringe players had done all right. second half could have been 5 or 6, and that wouldn't have flattered Cambridge at all. We were absolutely awful, and that was disappointing. And Plymouth didn't really get going first period, absolutely battered them last weekend in the second half, but couldn't hit a cow's arse with a cricket bat, unfortunately, and ended up losing the game 1-0. Defensively, we've been frail. I think that's been mentioned by everybody on here. And that's only emphasising the constant chopping and changing at centre-back and left-back. We've had 3 left-backs this season, Tom O'Connor, Connor Ogilvie and Zach Medley. We've had Christ knows how many centre-back partnerships. I think the only 2 consistents in that back 5 have been Ryan Jackson and Jack Bonham, and they've had their moments where they've looked shaky. On top of that, those that were reliable last season, the likes of Jack Tucker, Connor Ogilvie, Bonham, probably standards have dropped a little this season, and that comes from not playing in a settled back 4 or 5. And if you look back to last season, it was Jack Bonham, Barry Fuller, Max Amar, Jack Tucker and Connor Ogilvie for 90% of the games, and that breeds confidence, it breeds relationships, and in terms of knowing where people are on the pitch, and we've not had that this season. I think Steve Evans got it wrong in the summer. Like David and Reece have mentioned, we didn't sign anyone experienced at centre-half, one of the most key positions on the pitch. And let's hope that we do get someone in the January transfer window. But like Reece mentions, it's going to be tough. Would it be a loan? If it's a loan, it's going to be someone at the back end of their career or another youngster. And that's clearly not worked so far. In terms of top 3 performances for me, I've gone Rochdale, Bristol Rovers and Wigan. I thought Rochdale and Bristol Rovers... Yeah, I should have added that. Rochdale and Bristol Rovers, we were really good for 90 minutes. We were in control throughout, scored good goals and looked solid defensively. Probably deserved a clean sheet at Rochdale, but it was a good hit by the fella at the end. Wigan, I thought we were decent. They had some good players in that team. I know they were struggling in terms of what's going off the pitch, but they had some good championship-style players in that 11, and I thought we'd done really well. In a 4-3-3, which we've gone away from, and a certain Trey Coyle done really well in that game, and be interesting to see what happens in with the transfer window at the moment. Honourable mentions as well go to Blackpool at home, Charlton at home and Arsenal in the EFL Trophy. I thought that was a good performance by our reserves or fringe players or whatever you want to call them. Worst 3 for me, Cambridge in the EFL Trophy. Could have got beat 5 or 6 and that wouldn't have been unfair. Doncaster, you simply can't have 18-20% of the ball and expect to get stuff out of football matches. And Northampton, not so long ago, like I say, they'd lost 4-0 their previous 2 games. And we went back to our old generous Gillingham ways and got beat 3-1 and never really looked like getting anything out of the game. Exeter last 60 and Accrington Stanley at home are others that spring to mind as not being ones that you want to remember for too long. Transfer window very similar to David and Reece. Striker, we need a different type of front man now with Dane Oliver and John Akindi, the only 2 at the club, with Dominic Samuel seemingly out for the rest of the campaign. We need a centre-back, I've already said that. We need some experience, we need some leadership. And depending on whether we're going to play 4-3-3, because we were really good early part of the season when we were 4th after 5 games, that was the system we played. It was for Dane Oliver and or John Akindi through the middle, and then it was Jordan Graham and Trey Coyle from the sides, and we've gone away from that and chopped and changed a little bit since then, and results have sort of mirrored the way that we've changed our system. They've not been consistent. So maybe a winger if we persist with the 4-3-3 and keep Trey Coyle, but I'd imagine if Trey Coyle goes back to Arsenal this month, it would indicate that we're going away from that system. I did think maybe about a creative midfielder as well, but fingers crossed we can get Jacob Mellis fit and also Stuart O'Keefe, which would mean we can get Carl Dempsey higher up the pitch. Final position, I said at the start of the season, 8th. Again, like Reece and David, that's dropped off for me. There's not enough consistency in performances or results at the moment, and I think we're finished anywhere between 10th and 14th, which, like Reece alluded to, there's plenty of fans that are not that bothered at the moment. As long as we stay in the division, we're not being able to go to games. It's a weird old season, and it's not that we don't care. I think it's just that we don't feel as closely connected to the club and things at the moment. All the while we're having to watch on a TV screen, which is really sad. Right, that's enough from me tonight. As always, thanks to Reece and to David for coming on and giving their thoughts. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Please keep liking, retweeting, sharing, and most importantly, subscribing as we try to get towards 1,500 subscribers. Until next time, up the Gills.